Adolf Hitler was the leader of the Nazi Party and dictator of Germany from 1933 to 1945. His regime, the Third Reich, was characterized by a racist and expansionist ideology that culminated in World War II and the Holocaust. Hitler rose to power, promising to restore Germany's greatness after the humiliation of the Treaty of Versailles and the economic crisis. Considered good or bad, Hitler is universally considered one of history's greatest villains. His Nazi ideology promoted Aryan supremacy and anti-Semitism, leading to the genocide of approximately 6 million Jews, as well as millions of other minorities and political opponents. He was the main instigator of World War II, which resulted in the deaths of tens of millions of people and the devastation of much of Europe. What he did wrong: Holocaust, orchestrated the systematic genocide of Jews and other minorities in extermination camps. World War II initiated the deadliest conflict in human history. Totalitarian regime established a brutal dictatorship that suppressed all civil liberties and persecuted opponents. Crimes against humanity, responsible for numerous atrocities, including mass executions, torture, and human experimentation. What he did right. From the perspective of his supporters or propaganda, this is not my opinion, and according to studies and speeches of important people. During his rule, Germany experienced an initial economic recovery and a reduction in unemployment, driven by rearmament programs and public works. His supporters saw him as a strong leader who restored national pride and order. Death: committed suicide on April 30th, 1945, in his bunker in Berlin to avoid capture by Soviet forces. Benito Mussolini. Benito Mussolini was the founder of Italian fascism and dictator of Italy from 1922 to 1943. He established a totalitarian state, suppressing opposition and promoting a nationalist and racist ideology. Considered good or bad, Mussolini is widely considered a brutal dictator. His regime led to widespread suffering, colonial atrocities, and contributed to Italy's devastation in World War II. Some supporters saw him as a leader who restored order and modernized infrastructure. However, these achievements were overshadowed by the brutality of his regime. What he did wrong: totalitarian state, dismantled democratic institutions and created a police state. Violent repression, used the black shirts to terrorize and assassinate political opponents. Imperialist policies, invaded Ethiopia and Albania and allied with Nazi Germany. Racial laws, implemented anti-Semitic laws in 1938. What he did right, from the perspective of his supporters or propaganda, credited by some with improving infrastructure, draining swamps, and introducing social programs. However, these achievements were overshadowed by the brutality of his regime. Death: executed by anti-fascist partisans on April 28, 1945, while attempting to flee to Switzerland. Joseph Stalin. Joseph Stalin led the Soviet Union from 1924 until his death in 1953. He consolidated power to become an absolute dictator, implementing policies of forced agricultural collectivization, rapid industrialization, and mass repression. Considered good or bad, Stalin is a deeply controversial figure. He is credited with transforming the Soviet Union into an industrial and military power and leading the country to victory in World War II. However, his regime is condemned for famine, purges, and forced labor camps, gulags, that resulted in the deaths of millions. What he did wrong: famine of 1932 to 1933, Holodomor. His collectivization policies caused a famine that killed millions. Great Purge, executed hundreds of thousands of political opponents. Gulags, millions were sent to forced labor camps where many died. What he did right, from the perspective of his supporters or propaganda, led the USSR to victory in World War II and oversaw the country's transformation into a global superpower. Death: died of cerebral hemorrhage on March 5, 1953, although unproven assassination theories exist. Francisco Franco. Francisco Franco ruled Spain from 1939 to 1975 after leading national nationalist forces to victory in the Spanish Civil War. His regime was characterized by authoritarianism, nationalism, and Catholicism. Considered good or bad, Franco's legacy is controversial. He is condemned for the brutal repression of his opponents, but credited by some for keeping Spain out of World War II and for a period of economic growth. What he did wrong? Civil war and repression. Led a bloody civil war and established a regime that executed and imprisoned tens of thousands of opponents. Suppression of freedoms. Imposed a dictatorship that suppressed civil liberties and regional autonomy. What he did right from the perspective of his supporters or propaganda? Kept Spain neutral in World War II and oversaw the Spanish Miracle, a period of rapid economic growth. Death: died of natural causes on November 20th, 1975. Augusto Pinochet. Augusto Pinochet ruled Chile from 1973 to 1990 after leading a military coup that overthrew the government of Salvador Allende. His regime was marked by human rights violations and the implementation of neoliberal economic policies. Considered good or bad, Pinochet is widely condemned for human rights violations, but praised by some for his economic reforms, which led to a period of economic growth. What he did wrong: human rights violations, responsible for the death, torture, and disappearances of thousands of people. Coup d'etat: overthrew a democratically elected government. What he did right, from the perspective of his supporters or propaganda: implemented free market policies that stabilized the economy and led to significant growth. Death: died of complications from a heart attack on December 10, 2006. Pol Pot. Pol Pot was the leader of the Khmer Rouge and ruled Cambodia from 1975 to 1979. His regime attempted to create a utopian agrarian society, resulting in the Cambodian genocide. Considered good or bad, Pol Pot is universally condemned as one of history's most brutal tyrants, responsible for the deaths of about a quarter of his country's population. What he did wrong? Cambodian genocide: orchestrated the deaths of approximately 1.5 to 2 million people through executions, starvation, and forced labor. Year Zero: attempted to erase Cambodia's history and culture, forcing the population to live in inhumane conditions. What he did right? From the perspective of his supporters or propaganda, there are no recognized positive aspects of his regime. Death: he died of heart failure on April 15, 1998, while under house arrest. Muammar Gaddafi ruled Libya from 1969 to 2011. His regime, the Jamahiriya, was based on his own political ideology, the Third International Theory. Considered good or bad, Gaddafi is a polarizing figure. He is praised by some for modernizing Libya and using oil wealth to fund social programs, but condemned for his authoritarian regime, human rights violations, and support for terrorism. What he did wrong? Human rights violations, suppressed dissent, imprisoned and tortured opponents, support for terrorism, funded terrorist groups worldwide. What he did right? From the perspective of his supporters or propaganda, invested in education, health, and infrastructure, improving the living standards of many Libyans. Death: captured and killed by rebel forces on October 20, 2011, during the Libyan Civil War. Kim Il-sung. Kim Il-sung founded North Korea and ruled it from 1948 until his death. He established a totalitarian dictatorship based on his juche, self-reliance, ideology. Considered good or bad? In North Korea, he is revered as the great leader. Outside the country, he is condemned for creating one of the world's most repressive regimes. What he did wrong? Totalitarian regime: established a personality cult and a police state that controls all aspects of life. Korean War: initiated the Korean War that devastated the Korean Peninsula. What he did right? From the perspective of his supporters or propaganda, credited with liberating Korea from Japanese rule and for literacy and industrialization programs. Death: died of a heart attack on July 8, 1994. Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein ruled Iraq from 1979 to 2003. His regime was marked by wars, repression, and a strong personality cult. Saddam is seen by some as a strong leader who challenged the West, but is widely condemned for his brutality and crimes against humanity. What he did wrong: crimes against humanity, responsible for the massacre of Kurds and Shiites. Wars: launched the Iran-Iraq War and invaded Kuwait, leading to the Gulf War. What he did right, from the perspective of his supporters. Propaganda: modernized Iraq, investing in infrastructure, health, and education. Death: executed by hanging on December 30th, 2006, after being convicted of crimes against humanity. Hideki Tojo. Hideki Tojo was the Prime Minister of Japan during most of World War II. He was a key proponent of Japanese militarism and expansionism. Considered good or bad, Tojo is widely considered a war criminal, responsible for the atrocities committed by Japan during the war. What he did wrong: war crimes. Oversaw a regime that committed massacres, used forced labor, and mistreated prisoners of war. Attack on Pearl Harbor. Approved the attack that led the United States to enter the war. What he did right, from the perspective of his supporters or propaganda. Seen by some as a patriotic leader who defended Japan's interests. Death: executed by hanging on December 23, 1948, after being convicted of war crimes.